Go ahead, Rebbe.
Okay. So, I'd like to introduce our wonderful speaker for today, Ruchi Koval. Ruchi Koval is co-founder and associate director of Congregation JFX, an innovative Kiruv community in Cleveland, Ohio. She has been a Jewish educator for 2 decades, leading self-development Musa groups for adults and teens, and mentoring educators around the world. Ruchi is a certified parenting coach, motivational speaker, musician, author, and mother. She is a trip leader for Momentum, inspiring hundreds of women on their journeys in Israel. She is also the author of 2 books, Conversations with God and Soul Construction. Find Ruchi on Instagram, on her blog at outoftheorthodox.com, on Meaningful Minute, and via her podcasts. Download Ruchi Koval app to listen to many of her features online or join the Zoom class yourself. Okay, Ruchi, thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. It's so good to be here. My schedule changed this year as far as when my kids go off to school. So unfortunately, I haven't been able to join as much this year as last year, but it's wonderful to be back with all of you here today. So I have to start off today. I'm talking about happiness as a choice. We're in the month of Adar, right? We know Mishenichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha. Now, that's not a description of fact. That's a charge. Mishenichnas Adar, when we enter Adar, Marbim B'Simcha. We should increase our happiness, right? This is a charge for us. There's what you should do. You should increase your happiness. Just like conversely, Mishenichnas Av, when we enter the month of Av, Misma'atim B'Simcha, we are supposed to reduce our happiness. Now, we know in the month of Av, there are things we do to reduce our happiness, right? We don't listen to music. I mean, the customs can differ if you're Ashkenazi, Sephardi, whatever, but we don't listen to music. We don't have simchas. We don't buy new clothing, right? We're not supposed to, go on pleasure trips. So we can possibly extrapolate that those are actually things we should do when we're trying to increase our happiness. Put on the music, buy yourself something new, go somewhere fun, right? The point here is that happiness is in our hands. Happiness is a choice. Now, I have to tell you something funny. So this past week, I went to Irvine, California. There's a shul there called Beth Jacob, and I met them through a Momentum Israel trip, and they brought me out to speak. So I did 2 talks. The first talk I did for a group of donors, and the topic that they picked was happiness as a choice. And the second talk I did was for the whole community, and that was sort of like an overview of my book, Soul Construction. Now, Soul Construction, which is my second book that I wrote, it's a contemporary Musar book. So it's based on the concept of Musar, for those of you who are not familiar, is about developing and refining your character traits, which starts with self-awareness. What are my character traits? Where are they weak? Where are they strong? What can I do? How can I make them better? And so the book that I wrote focuses on 8 character traits: forgiveness, judging favorably, acceptance, generosity, silence, speech, renewal, and happiness. So happiness is the last chapter, and the second talk that I did was an overview of the whole thing. Anyway, so I can't remember if it was Thursday or Friday. I came home from California on Thursday night. Friday, I had a very, very frustrating day. Like, just a lot of things happened that just got me in a really bad mood. And so Friday night at the meal, my husband said to me, "Oh, what did you speak about in California?" So I started laughing. I said, "I spoke about happiness as a choice." I said, "I guess I should probably choose it, huh?" I said, "Today I'm choosing anger. Maybe tomorrow I'll choose happiness." So I say this because when we say happiness is a choice, right? We're not saying that a person is going to be happy all the time. I mean, really, I've got a peckle. I'm sure everybody here has a peckle. That's just how it is, to be a human being. The reason we say Nishmas and the reason we say Mizmor Latoda is to remind ourselves of all the good we have, because we often spend more time thinking about our peckle than about, all the good things that we have. So we have to choose happiness by reminding ourselves of all the good things that we have, which we'll get to later. But the point is that just because happiness is a choice doesn't mean it's an easy choice. It doesn't always even mean it's an accessible choice. We all have anger, we all have sadness, we all have fear, we all have worry, we all have loneliness, and sometimes happiness is a more accessible choice than others. But anyway, I just like, I was like, today I choose anger. Maybe tomorrow I'll choose happiness. But all that having been said, happiness is still a choice. And the Torah commands us to be happy, right? Whether it's Adar, Hashem says, I want you to be happy in Adar. Why? Because I made this amazing nace for you in Adar, and I want you to know this and focus on this. I was thinking, for those of you who are in the United States, perhaps you heard about this day of hate that was planned for yesterday. There were all these like white supremacists putting out these notices, particularly in big cities, about how they were planning this like day of hate, anti-Semitism, and they were going to engage in all this nonviolent anti-Semitic behavior. And I was thinking to myself, like, Haman already chose a day of hate, and he picked Adar, and he picked wrong, right? He picked Adar because he said, oh, every other month has something good that happened for the Jewish people, except for Adar. The only thing he could think of that happened to Adar was that Moshe Rabbeinu died. Little did he know that Moshe Rabbeinu was also born in Adar. So he picked Adar, and that didn't really end very well for Haman, right? So here we have our modern day anti-Semites who are far less educated than Haman, picking a day of hate for Adar. Really? Baruch Hashem. Nothing happened, at least as far as I heard or saw. So Baruch Hashem, but Adar, Hashem says, is a time I want you to be happy. It's an incredibly good time for the Jews. It's a positive time for the Jews. It's a powerful time for the Jews. So I want you to choose happiness, says Hashem. I want you to amplify and maximize your happiness at this time. Now, there are a number of obstacles to happiness. There's a number of reasons why it's hard to choose happiness, okay? And one of them is that we are so wired to notice the bad more than the good, okay? I quote this psychologist in my book. I don't remember his name at the moment, but he said, positive things are like Teflon for the brain. Negative things are like Velcro for the brain, which means that we're far more likely to deflect the good and to glom onto the bad, right? Any of you who has ever overthought something or obsessed about something, it's usually something bad. We don't usually overthink and obsess about the good. And the part of this is just biologically, right? If a human being wants to be safe, you have to always be noticing potential threats and potential predators, right? And who's threatening me, who's threatening my kids, who's threatening my family. So this part is partly like a survival mechanism, right? But this is not a normal way to live, to always be hyper-focused. Some people have this with their health. Some people get very anxious. They're always noticing, wait, is my throat hurting? Wait, is that a mole? Wait, is that a migraine? Okay. Then they've got themselves diagnosed with every form of cancer after 5 minutes. So listen, a little bit of this is a good thing because we have to take care of our health, right? You can't just say, it's nothing. I'm sure I'll be fine. Some of that is good. We can't be overly, worried and anxious all the time. Then you can't live. But a part of the reason why it's hard to choose happiness is because our brains are wired to Velcro itself to the bad and to notice, this is hurting me. Okay, but everything else is not hurting me, right? Today I'm worried. Yeah, but every other day I'm not worried. This kid is driving me crazy. Yeah, but all the other kids are not driving me crazy. We're hyper wired to focus on the bad. And that's why we have to overcome that tendency by forcing ourselves, and this is where happiness is a choice, forcing ourselves to focus on the good. So the antidote to this problem is gratitude. And gratitude is such a critical function of happiness. And this is why Nishmat, when I was able to participate every day last year, it was such a powerful exercise for me to just start out the day hyper focusing on the good. Truly meditating on everything that I was grateful for in my life, the people, the opportunities, the blessings, the advantages, all the parts of my body that are working, all the parts of my life that are working, all the people who love me, all the people that I love, the house that I have, and it doesn't mean that I'm always going to be grateful about all those things every day. But when you start out your day with gratitude, and Mizmor L'Soda, the fact that it was said 8 times, whenever I am able to participate in the Zoom, but I, Baruch Hashem, have a husband and 7 children. And every time I say Mizmor L'Soda 8 times, each time I say it, I focus on another member of my family. And I noticed the tendency in my brain, to just this morning when I was saying it, and one of my family members, I was like holding them in my brain and meditating on that person while I was saying Ms. Merla Soda, and saying, oh, I'm grateful for this. And then I noticed the part of my brain that's saying, yeah, but this. And then me responding, shut up. We're not talking about that now. So this is a mental exercise, right? Where gratitude, focused, meditative, verbal gratitude has the power to overwhelm that part of our brain that is wired to Velcro itself to the bad. And it unvelcros itself from the bad and it Velcros itself to the good. And how powerful that is. Okay, so that's one thing. That's one obstacle to happiness, is this tendency of the brain. Another super powerful obstacle to happiness is the insidiousness of commercialism. And that is these relentless messages in our culture that money can buy happiness. Now, if I were to poll all 88 of you on this Zoom, and I would say to you, does money buy happiness? I'm going to guess most of you would say no, money doesn't buy happiness, including me. And yet, when I'm in a bad mood, I can promise you, I'm putting stuff in my Amazon cart. What is that about? So first of all, there is a difference between serotonin and dopamine. These are two different hormones in the brain. Serotonin is a low-level sense of joy and contentment and satisfaction with one's life. Serotonin is a very important hormone. We need it to survive. We need it to be happy, right? It's this sort of low-level haze of joy. If you've ever been at a gathering where you're surrounded by people who you care about, family or friends or whoever, and you look around and you're like, oh, this is really nice, right? That's serotonin. Dopamine is this like instant rush of like a flush of pleasure that comes and goes. Okay. We get dopamine from I'll speak for myself. I get dopamine from opening that bag of potato chips, or taking that first French fry, crunchy, crispy, salty, delicious. But then what happens? You have a few of them, you have a few more, you have a few too many, and then you're like, well, I'm done. It's a rush of pleasure that comes and goes. Dopamine is where addictions come in, like gambling, a flush of pleasure, right? A person takes a pain pill, they get this flush. A person drinks alcohol, they get that buzz, they get that flush. But the thing with dopamine is it comes and goes. I think retail therapy has its place in the happiness continuum of choosing happiness. I do. The Torah says, right? When it says, V'samachta b'chagecha, you shall be happy on your Yantif. It's a mitzvah to be happy on Sukkot and Pesach and Shavuos. What does the Torah say? The Gemara says that the way we're happy is for men, meat and wine, for women, new clothing, and for kids, sweets and treats. What's the Torah telling us? The Torah is telling us that retail therapy has its place, that food therapy has its place. Let's just not confuse it with what it is and isn't. It isn't long-term happiness. It isn't serotonin. It is dopamine, right? It'll give you a rush of joy. When I'm having a bad day, I call it a PITS day. PITS stands for punch in the stomach. Okay, something bad happens. I'm really sad. I'm really scared. I'm really angry. I'm feeling really discouraged. I call that a PITS day. Friday was a PITS day. What do I do on a PITS day? I'm very, very nice to myself. I absolve myself of all my responsibilities that day. And retail therapy. I do things that make me get that rush of pleasure. I will buy myself something new in order to kind of give me that bit of dopamine, not because I'm confusing it with long-term happiness. I know exactly what it is. It's a short-term jolt, and there's a place for that, right? The problem, right, is that if we use it to achieve long-term happiness or to numb our feelings and emotions, this is where we get into trouble. But if we know what it is, we're not getting ourselves into trouble. The problem with the world of advertisement and commercialism is that it gives us a message that this is happiness, okay? And as much as we all think we're so smart and we really know what's what, the bottom line is that there are millions of dollars of research and psychology going into how companies advertise to make you believe that this will make you happy. Okay. So I'll give you a couple of examples. McDonald's calls its meal a happy meal. Now, I've been keeping kosher my whole life. I've never eaten a happy meal. For all I know, it would make me very happy. Honestly, I have no idea. Okay. But I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that it's probably just food. And it will probably just make you as happy as any good food, if it's good. Again, I don't know. But notice how McDonald's, and this is far from the only example, Trident does this, Pepsi does this. Pepsi actually has an advertisement. They had one a while ago. It was called Happiness is a Choice. Here were your three choices: Pepsi, Diet Pepsi, and Pepsi Max. You choose. Happiness is a choice. My point is that companies are co-opting the language of happiness to try and manipulate your brain into thinking that this will make you happier. And you can look at that and say that's a stupid campaign all you want, but thousands and thousands of dollars of research money is proving otherwise, that these campaigns work. Here's another example. Last month, I was so grateful and privileged to be able to go on a cruise with my husband. Never done anything like that before. It was absolutely a treat. It was incredible. On the way home from the cruise, we're flying United, and on the little screen in front of your face, United is advertising a cruise. It was the same cruise that I was just on. And I'm watching this, perfectly manicured man, woman, son, daughter, all four of them, very joyously enjoying this cruise. They're laughing nonstop. They're going down the water slides together. I'm looking at this ad and I'm thinking to myself, gosh, they seem much happier than I was. And I was just on the same cruise. You go on a cruise, you don't laugh nonstop for a week. Okay. You have good times, you have less good times. Going on a cruise certainly does not guarantee happiness. When I was on the cruise, this couple walks into the elevator. Yes, there were 16 floors on this boat. This couple walks into the elevator, very well coiffed, all made up, beautiful clothing. Apparently it's a thing on cruises. There's formal night and people literally bring cocktail attire to go out to dinner. I don't know. Okay, it's a thing. And they come into the elevator and they're arguing about which bar they went to that night. There's a lot of different, places to drink on the boat. And she says to him, how come you always pick the same bar over and over again? And he says, well, you pick the bar. She's like, no, that's not the point. The point is that you always do this. You're so boring. You're always picking the same things over and over again. And there they go. Okay, my first thought was please, there's 20 other people in this elevator and it's not very big. We don't all have to listen to this. But my second thought was, does growing on a cruise make you happy? No, because when you haven't gone on a cruise and you look at that ad in the United plane, you're like, oh my gosh, that's what I need. Calgon, take me away. For those of you who remember that ad, I wish I could go on this cruise. Oh my gosh, that would do it. That would do it. That would do it. No, it would not do it. You still have to choose happiness on a cruise because you could spend the whole cruise arguing with your spouse about which bar you went to. You could. You really, really could. So the scourge of materialism and commercialism and advertising is there to convince you that happiness is on the other side of this credit card transaction. And that is a very large mistake. No, it's not. Spending money can certainly give you a jolt of joy. It can certainly give you something temporary to enjoy. It can certainly buy experiences, right? That should you choose joy, you will enjoy very much. I'm sure all of us have been on vacations where people fought the whole time. The weather was bad. The food was disappointing. The accommodations were not as expected. Vacations certainly do not guarantee happiness. So that's, I believe, obstacle number 2 to happiness, which is these messages that are bombarding our minds at all times. This will buy you happiness, and this will buy you happiness, and this will buy you happiness. And let's recognize what it is and what it isn't. So that's number 2. Number 3. I'm just going to put the bullet points in the chat so that you guys can see it. Okay. So bullet point number 1 is that our brains hold on to the bad. And we have to fight that with gratitude.
Ruchi, you can share the screen. I just made you co-host. If you
Oh,
want.
okay. I mean, I don't have anything particular on my screen, but I'm just putting a couple of notes in the chat box. And the second thing is that commercialism messes with our gratitude. And what we have to understand, how do we overcome that? We didn't speak about that part yet. How do we overcome that? We have to overcome that we did a little bit, by recognizing that money can buy certain things. Money can give us pleasure and joy, but it cannot guarantee us long-term happiness. Okay, so the other thing that I want to say about this is very interesting. There's a woman, Gretchen Rubin, a Jewish woman, who did this whole research project called the Happiness Project. One of the people she interviewed for her Happiness Project was actually Rabbi Zelig Pliskin, famous Musar author and teacher. And one of the things she came up with is that she's not Jewish. I thought she was Jewish. Is that a person who has money, if they want to spend it, right? So while it's true that money can't buy happiness, right? Like a new pair of shoes are only going to go so far. A delicious meal in a restaurant is only going to go so far. But if you want to spend your money on something, what research shows is that actually you should spend your money on experiences as opposed to things. Okay, so better to spend your money on a trip than to spend your money on a gadget. Better to go out and enjoy a night on the town with people you love or enjoy spending time with, rather than buying yourself something new to wear. Because the memories of those experiences, right, will last far longer than whatever item you're going to buy. So that is something interesting to think about. That's something that I have implemented for sure since I encountered this idea, is that if I have money to spend for a birthday or for an anniversary or something like that, I would way rather spend it on an experience, whether for myself or to spend time with somebody that I love, as opposed to buying a thing. Okay. The third obstacle to happiness that I want to mention, and all this, by the way, is in the last chapter of my book, Soul Construction, this is a quote from one of my teachers in seminary, Mrs. Tova Leibowitz. And she said, the recipe to unhappiness is compare, compare, compare. I was in seminary in 1993. Okay, so this was before the advent of the digital age, where a person could not just compare themselves to all the people they know, but could also compare themselves to millions of people they don't know online or on social media or what have you. And this has been, proven over and over again, is that when we spend time focusing on what other people have, particularly the highlight reel of what other people have, which is typically what people put on social media, or even, when people get dressed up and they go out and that's where you meet them, they're putting out the best of themselves, right? Because the people who don't feel like getting dressed up and going out, they're at home crying under their covers. Okay, so the people that you see are the people who are putting their best foot forward. I was thinking about this after I had my, pretty bad day on Friday, and I did not sleep well on Friday night. I was literally up half the night thinking and crying and thinking and crying and thinking and crying. I don't recommend that, by the way, but that's what I did. And I got up in the morning, and what did I do? I washed my face, and I got dressed, and I went to shul, and I taught my parsha class, and I did all the things, right? And I was thinking to myself, nobody in this room has any idea, of what I've been through these past 24 hours. Why? Because I'm showing my best self to the universe, which is not a bad thing. It's a very appropriate thing, right? But what happens is that we see the best of everyone, and we don't know about all the difficult things that are going on. And we don't know about, what goes on behind closed doors. So of course, this has been very well spoken about. Of course, we are going to compare our full reality to their highlight reel. So these comparisons are going to make it very difficult for us to be happy with what we have, because it seems that other people have more. And this is what's fascinating about being a human being. What you have could seem like enough until you see that somebody else has more. There's an article in the New York Times. It was later magnified into a book by Sam Polk. His book is called For the Love of Money. And in it, he talks about being a hedge fund manager. And he's like in his 20s, he's making oodles and oodles of money. This was before the housing bubble tanked in 2008. And he had started out, like, he had a very difficult young adulthood. He was addicted and he went through all these things, and he settled himself down, but basically he ended up applying his addiction towards making money, and he became a workaholic, and he was making all this money. And at one point he was like, I cannot believe I'm making all this money. I never thought I would get to this point. This is so unbelievable and incredible. And it's time for the end of year bonuses, and he gets a bonus. I don't remember the amount. Let's say it was $1 million, right? And he's like, oh my gosh, I had never dreamed I would see this much money in my life. And then his coworker sitting next to him gets a $2 million bonus. And all of a sudden, he felt like a have-not. And he talks about the insanity of this, how what you have could be so much, yet because you're looking at what somebody else has, all of a sudden it doesn't feel like enough. This is why the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, in chapter 4, Mishnah 1 says, Ezehu ashir, hasameach bechalko. Who is wealthy? The one who is happy with what he has. What does that mean? Why doesn't it say who is happy? The one who is happy with what he has. Why does it say who is wealthy? Because the Torah is teaching us here how to feel wealthy. Wealthy is not an objective state of being. Wealthy is about your attitude towards what you have, right? Because what you have may or may not make you happy, right? Because look, a person could have $1 million and then they feel less than because the other person has $2 million. I am sure many of you could think of somebody who has very little, yet is happy. And you can think of people who have a lot materially, yet they are unhappy, right? And the Torah is not telling us here the secret of happiness. It's telling us the secret of wealth. Ezehu ashir, hasameach bechalko. Wealth is not about what you have. It's about how you feel about what you have. And you get to decide how you feel about what you have. Now, nobody is saying this is easy. This takes a lot of mental work. Today when we were starting to say Nishmat and we were starting to say Mizmor L'Soda, and I was like, okay, Ruchi, put brain in gratitude gear. It's an avoda. This happiness stuff is hard, right? It takes a lot of work to be this happy. Nobody is happy just by accident. You look around at happy people. I remember thinking this when I was younger. My grandmother, whom I've spoken about before, she's an incredible, incredible woman. Unfortunately, she's not well. She went through so much loss. She was a Holocaust survivor. She lost 8 siblings and both her parents in Auschwitz. And then her son, my father, passed away when he was 30. Her husband died. Her second husband died. I mean, she's been through a lot. She was always such a happy person. And when I was younger, I used to think to myself, wow, what a great personality Bobby has. I wish I could have a personality like that. The older I got, the more I recognized she decided to be happy. That was a choice that she made. And I think that most people who present with that kind of eternal happiness, my guess is most of them have not just stumbled upon that personality by accident, because life certainly conspires to get you down. That's a decision that person is making to choose happiness. And I'm going to say to choose happiness most of the time, because you don't have to choose happiness all of the time, right? So that's the final obstacle to happiness that I'd like to talk about today. That happiness, or unhappiness, I should say, is comparison, right? And the way we choose happiness is by remembering not just all the good that we have, but that the joy and the wealthiness that we'll feel is far more correlated with our attitude about what we have than about what we actually have. And we have to remember that we're comparing our whole life with another person's highlight reel. Okay? So I'm just going to write that down for you guys. Recipe for unhappiness is compare. And happiness is your attitude toward what you have. Okay. So in sum, to sort of close up this this concept and this theme, I just want to share that I started off by saying that happiness is a choice, right? Hashem gives us a mitzvah many times in the Torah to be happy, right? The Torah says when we give bikurim, v'samachta b'chol hatov asher nasan lechem Hashem Elokecha, you shall be happy with all the good that Hashem has given to you, right? This is like almost the secret of where Hashem tells us, how do you choose happiness? You choose happiness by remembering all the good. You choose happiness by reminding yourself that you are so blessed and that you have so much. And that if we think to ourselves that happiness is just on the other side of this person being like this, or me buying that, right? If we make happiness conditional on external things happening to us, right? And particularly on other people's decisions, right? I'll be happy when my spouse this, I'll be happy when I have a spouse, I'll be happy when I leave my spouse, I'll be happy when my kid does this, I'll be happy when my kid does that. I'm just waiting for this kid to get married. I'm just waiting for this kid to have a baby. I'm just waiting for myself to meet my soulmate. I'm just waiting to be able to make a living. I'm just waiting for my health. That's fine. We all have things that we're waiting for and davening for. But do not make your happiness conditional on those things. Because happiness is not about what happens to you. Happiness is about what you choose in the face of what happens to you. There's an expression, you're only as happy as your least happy child. That is a terrible idea. If I were only as happy as my least happy child, I would have been miserable for the past 30 years. The point of choosing happiness is that it is dependent on no one. That I can be happy even if others are not happy, even if others are not behaving, even if others are choosing badly, even if bad things are happening to me, even if I have health issues, even if I have money issues. I'm not whitewashing, and I'm not, trying to make this sound easy. It's not easy. All the things I talked about, choosing gratitude, focusing on the good, remembering that you can't compare yourself to other people, right? Remembering that everything that is advertised to us is not where we're going to find our happiness, right? That stuff is hard, you guys. It takes a lot of effort and energy to choose that stuff. But this idea that we have the power to be happy no matter what is happening to us, and that furthermore, Hashem wants us to be happy, not because he's giving us more work, because he loves us. And he knows that we can be happy right here, right now, today, with everything that's going on, with everything that's unresolved, with everything that hasn't happened yet, with all the annoying people in my life. I have the power to choose happiness. That, to me, is one of the most empowering ideas in all of Judaism. And so I want to wish you guys a bracha. Hashem should give you the strength to choose happiness. Maybe not every day, but hopefully mostly every day. Thank you.
Gorgeous. Thank you, Ruchi.
Thank you.
Ruchi, this is Charlene
Thank
from
you,
Muncie.
Ruchi.
Can